This week, we give our first impressions of the 2021 Mercedes-Benz GLA, tips for road tripping with your pets, and whether expensive wiper blades are worth the extra cost. Next on Talking Cars. Hi, and welcome back. I'm Mike Quincy.
I'm Emily Thomas.
And I'm Ryan Pizlakowski.
So to kick off this podcast, which of course is my favorite and your favorite, we're going to really get down to where the rubber meets the road and highlight our first experiences that we're having with the redesigned 2021 Mercedes-Benz GLA. This is a test car that we bought for our test program. This is the fourth model on Mercedes' front drive architecture that includes the A-Class and the CLA sedans and the GLB SUV. As the company's entry-level model, and I use air quotes on that, the GLA starts at $36,230 and goes up to over $55,000 for the range-topping AMG GLA 45. It's available in either front or all-wheel drive. And the base GLA has a claimed EPA fuel economy of 27 miles per gallon overall. Now, one of the good news, best news about the GLA, it comes standard with forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection, and blind spot warning. So some of the chief competitors of the GLA include the Lexus UX, the BMW X1 and X2, the Volvo XC40, and the Audi Q3. So we spent some time and some miles driving our GLA test car. So Ryan, please give us your first impressions.
So my first impression is that it's better than the previous GLA we tested. This car is a bit bigger, roomier inside. The last GLA was really cramped. It was the roof line was much more sloped down and it was just smaller, right? This is quite a bit roomier. I can sit in the back seat now. I mean, imagine that. I can sit in the back seat without hunching over. The car, it handles well. It's fun to drive. It's not a race car, but it's nimble. It's fun to buzz around town with. It's tough because you mentioned the Audi Q3 is a competitor, and I'm very fond of that car. That's a really nice car. So for me, the GLA, it doesn't really, it wouldn't be my choice. I would choose a Q3 just because the GLA has a lot of road noise. It rides pretty stiff. It's firm. You know, on most roads you can really get jostled around. The worst part for me, I think, is the infotainment system. There's a steep learning curve. You got to really spend some time with it, get used to it. The first few times I got in it, I found myself getting frustrated trying to do simple tasks. But as far as just driving it around, it's a fun little car. It really is. But I would choose a Q3 personally, if I was choosing in that group of cars.
So Emily, I know that we've talked about the Q3 in a previous podcast, and you're pretty fond of that car. So when you stack up the new Mercedes GLA with the Q3, what do you come away with?
So I'm with Ryan. I still love the Q3 more than the GLA for a lot of the same reasons that Ryan shared. It was I had the GLA for the past week. And it was a little bit of a culture shock for me because I went from having the Hyundai Palisade for 3 or 4 weeks and then went into the GLA. And so not just because of the luxury components, but just even space wise, it felt a lot tighter for us as a family to be moving from the two vehicles. I know comparatively to the previous GLA version, this is roomier, but I would say as a family of 4, I've got 2 car seats in the back. I've got a rear-facing one and a forward-facing one. And it just still felt kind of cramped for us. And then that's just counting the humans. If I now throw in all of the additional gear that comes with having 2 small children, it feels even tighter, And I was just, throwing something into the trunk, and the cargo room is okay for the day-to-day kind of stuff you might need to do, maybe grocery shopping or, school pickups and stuff like that. But if you had to do any sort of road travel with kids, it's not really the vehicle that I would recommend. Or if that's something that you do a lot as a family, that would be really hard. I've said this before, and it's totally true. Anyone with kids knows, when you travel with kids, it's like you're packing for the apocalypse because you need not just all their gear, but then you need 20 backup outfits for the inevitable things that are going to happen. And that GLA cargo space is not going to let me pack for the apocalypse by any means. So So like as a family, it's not what I would go for. And then that's not even including the controls. I was laughing when Ryan was talking about it because I think I remember it may not have been the GLA, but I've seen his lack of fondness for the Mercedes-Benz control systems because I was in the shop one day and he came out of one of the test cars like in a huge huff. He was so mad at the system because he couldn't figure out how to get it going and do what it needed to.
It's overcomplicated.
Well, yeah, it is. And, you know, I think we talk about this, right? That like we go from car to car, right? We're switching between cars. And so like we do try to factor that into our assessment of the control systems versus somebody who's going to live with it for a while. But even still, even if you were to live with the system for a while, I think it would still pose some pretty serious problems because anything that you had to do while you were driving would be a huge driver distraction. Like it would be really difficult to pay attention to the road and navigate through all the different menus and systems and find where things are and stuff like that. So like my best recipe for someone to succeed with this system, if this is what they have and this is what they want, is try to pre-program as much stuff, you know, beforehand, before you get on the road. You know, make all your radio presets for all your children so that, you know, you don't have to sit there and twiddle and, you know, try to punch in the numbers or whatever. You know, set your seat up the way that you want. There are going to be things that are difficult because, you know, especially if you're doing a longer drive, you want to adjust, you know, the seat comfort as like you're sitting in that seat longer and longer. So that might be a challenge to preset. But I think there are some ways around it. It's just something that you have to be really intentional about. And I think that's important for like the owners to know.
Right. But Emily, what struck me about your story about Ryan and his frustration is that the three of us and everyone that works at Consumer Reports Auto Test Center, we know cars. We have experience with these things. And when it sets us back, the experts, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, when you think about the controls, and I think one of the real sticking points with the GLA and a lot of Mercedes models is on the steering wheel. They have these little touch sensitive pads, and you just glance them with your thumb or a finger or something like that, and you inadvertently change the radio station.
I'm lost. Yeah.
And you know, Emily, you talked about how it's not a great road trip car with kids, and Ryan, you said, you know, it's kind of noisy and the ride's kind of stiff. I drove our GLA test car to Vermont and back, and I couldn't agree with you more. It is a noisy car. It's a kind of a stiff riding, but again, it's the controls that are such a deal breaker for me. I spent last weekend driving a Hyundai, and I'm perpetually amazed at how a Hyundai or a Kia, which generally costs a lot less money than a Mercedes or BMW or one of the other things, has immensely easier to master controls. And it's one of those things we've talked about in other Talking Car episodes, and it still amazes me that this is, you know, the way of the world. But, you know, for buyers out there looking to go upscale, well, get ready.
Yeah.
They're going to test your ability to multitask.
I would like to add, though, I mean, if you are you're already set on a Mercedes, you know, a small Mercedes SUV. I think the GLB, which we've tested, it's a little bit bigger. They claim it physically doesn't feel that much bigger, but interior wise, it is bigger. I think it has better cargo space in the rear. I think that makes more sense than the GLA personally. From a cargo standpoint, it still rides stiff and it's a little bit noisy, and it has those controls. But cargo wise, it's a better choice, I think. Yeah. Well,
anyway, listen, thanks guys for your impressions of the GLA, and for more on the GLA, check out consumerreports.org. And before we move on, we wanted to take a moment to let you know about the Talking Cars donation program. If you're not aware, Consumer Reports is a nonprofit organization, so all the work we do is funded by memberships as well as donations. If you're able to give, it really does help us keep doing the work we do, including this show. You can find out more information at cr.org/givetalkingcars. Now on to questions. Then please keep these questions coming. We love them. Text, video questions, smoke signals, you name it. Send everything to talkingcars@icloud.com. That's talkingcars@icloud.com. So first up is a video question from Colorado.
Hello, Talking Cars. Right now, I'm running all-terrain tires with 3-peak mountain snowflake rating on my Forerunners. I want to see if there is any other mud terrain tires with 3-peak mountain snowflake rating. Thank you so much. Keep up the good work.
Great job framing the video. It looked very professional. It's almost like, hi, this is my car dealer and these are my cars. Anyhow, listen, one of Sierra's top tire dudes is here. Ryan, take it away.
I like that video. That was great. 2 beautiful Toyotas he has there. So just short answer is I couldn't find any. I couldn't find any mud terrain tires with a mountain snowflake symbol. And that makes sense to me because the mountain snowflake symbol, it's a 3-peak mountain snowflake symbol. It's a symbol you'll find on all winter tires. And nowadays, we're seeing them on some all-season products. They look like an all-season product, but we call them all-weather tires. And then, in his case, some all-terrain tires. And what this means is they pass a certain level of snow traction ability. They pass this test, and they get a stamp on the sidewall that says that they passed that test. And it's a little 3-peak mountain snowflake symbol. And so getting back to the mud terrain tire, the way these tires are built, what they're intended for, are 2 very opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of design. So a tire that's good in snow has a softer compound, and it has lots of sharp biting edges, smaller areas to grab the snow, right? If you look at the top vehicle he has on his left, our left, his right, it looks like a BF Goodrich all-terrain KO. I'm a tire nerd. I can tell by the tread.
You don't say.
And that tire has a 3-peak mountain snowflake symbol. So that tire, it will bite the snow. A mud terrain tire, he doesn't have on either of those cars right now. The tread has they're big blocks and bigger voids, but the blocks are chunky and smooth in a lot of cases. They put some siping in them, but then the compound's a little bit harder too to resist cutting and chipping when you're crawling through the mud and over rocks and stuff. So it's the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of design for what you're using it for. So it would almost be somewhat impossible to make a mud terrain tire with the snowflake symbol, because it's basically going to turn back into an all-terrain tire because you're going to cut it up and make smaller voids and change the compound a little bit. I have some personal experience actually driving on mud terrain tires. I was in a Rubicon, which comes from the factory with a mud terrain tire. I drove that in a little bit of snow once, and it was terrifying. They can't bite the snow as well. At Consumer Reports, we don't test mud terrain tires. They're meant for off-road. We do test all-terrain tires, not the super aggressive all-terrain tires that he has at BF Goodrich on his left there. If you really need to drive in the snow, it's worth getting a set of snow tires or running those all-terrains. But I don't think you're going to find a mud terrain tire with a snowflake symbol on it that's going to be any good anyway.
Well, seeing that he's from Colorado, and he's got these trucks that are obviously good off road, and they have to deal with all the snow and all that other stuff. It's kind of an interesting question because he's looking for sort of the best of both worlds. But I was just thinking when you started testing tires, did you think there were going to be so many variations of slicing and dicing, mud and off road and snow and winter and all season, and it just makes my head spin.
Yeah, well, it's interesting though, because if you can design something to do one thing and it'll do that thing well. So like a winter tire is excellent in snow, but on a dry or wet road, the braking distances might not be as good, right? But then we have that's why we have all season tires. They kind of do everything well-ish, right? And then within that, then they're not all created equal. Some brands are better than others, blah blah blah. But there's a tire for almost every application, but you got to know what you need. And it sounds like for where he is, he's actually running the proper tire. If he wants that aggressive off-road tire that has a snowflake symbol, that's probably it.
Great question. For more on tires, check out consumerreports.org. We've got a whole bunch of tire information, but we're moving on to the next video question. This is Chris from Redding, California.
Hey, Talking Cars. Should I have spent $50 for fancy silicone wiper blades, or should I have just bought the Ford OEM regular rubber ones for half the price as a replacement? So anyways, I'd love to hear your answer, and have a great day. And in the meantime, I'm going to put these on, and we'll see how they do. Thank you.
So wiper blades, something every driver has to deal with. Ryan, you looked into this. What'd you find out?
So we don't test wiper blades any longer. We used to test them actually at our headquarters in Yonkers, New York. But we do have a little bit of a buying guide on consumerreports.org. What we did find though is you don't have to spend a ton of money. So I would definitely go to like a major retailer, and they'll have a whole aisle section with even a little computer that helps you select what you need for your vehicle, different sizes. There's different sizes for different vehicles. And even from your right wiper to your left wiper, there's a lot of times a different size. So that's something to pay attention to. But I wouldn't go buying, some super cheap ones offline from some obscure place. I would, try to stick with a name brand. I think more of the point is wiper blades get beat up. Being on the windshield of your car for a year is a very harsh place to be, no matter where you live, right? The sun, the wind, the sand and rocks that get kicked up at it. One swipe of a wiper blade over a dry, salty windshield in the middle of the winter is not good for the rubber, right? We found you have to replace them almost twice a year, every 6 months or so. Inspect them, make sure that they're still attached properly. I mean, I remember my mom had a wiper blade fall off once, and the whole thing came off, and the metal arm just went over the windshield and just put a big scratch in the glass, in the middle of a snowstorm, right? So it's a nightmare. And if you've ever been driving in a snowstorm and you don't have wipers, you pull over because you can't drive. The other aspect to these wiper blade, the whole wiper blade thing is the windshield, the condition of your windshield. Like I was saying, there's rocks and sand and stuff that get kicked up at while you're driving. You don't realize it because you're in the comfort of the vehicle behind the windshield. The windshield gets pitted. And what that means is you have these little micro pits in it, little holes. And over time, they get worse and worse. And you could have a brand new wiper blade. And when you push it, it goes across your windshield, all that water can get caught in those little holes. And that's why you get that like smudging or dragging effect where it doesn't look like it's really cleaning it off. And a lot of times people blame that on the wiper blade. And it might not always be. I mean, it could be. But that's why you need to inspect all this stuff. That's my 2 cents.
Emily, you had an interesting wiper blade story.
Yeah, it sounds like me and Ryan's mom might have had the same thing happen. I think it was like the first time I had to replace my blades, and apparently I didn't put one of them on all the way, or it didn't like lock on. So I'm driving back to college, and it's raining, so I'm using my windshield wipers, and one of them just kind of goes flying off the car. And I had to pull over, and thankfully I still had the old ones in my trunk because I don't know where the other one was. It was like on the side of the road or something.
Oh geez, I thought you were going to say you went back and got the old one.
So I had to just put on the old one, so I at least had something to get me to back to school. But I mean, hopefully this isn't your first time replacing your blades, and so you will make sure that they're on properly. But it's important. It is important.
They're very important.
Double check.
Great. Thanks for your answers, guys. A good question. And listen, we're moving on to the next one. And how cool is this? We have a trifecta of video questions. We have 3 video questions this podcast. This is AJ from Washington, D.C.
Hi, Talking Cars. This is my Subaru Ascent, and I saw that in your ratings it dropped in reliability. But I have a question. There was a recall for the CVT in December 2019, and so I took it in. They gave me a nice loaner, and they reprogrammed the CVT's tension, and what I noticed later is that it felt a little tighter and started running a little better, and even my fuel economy went up. So my question is, at what point, since that's during the survey time period, at what point would the numbers possibly improve? And the other follow-up question is, Subaru threw in a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty with the CVT. So I'm covered for 10 years, which is pretty nice to know. And of course, we put a Forester right next to it. So when a company stands behind their products, how is that factored into your surveys? Thanks, and I love your show.
So I checked in with CR's reliability survey experts, and we have, believe it or not, more than one. And first, listen, it's great news that your car is running better after the recall was taken care of. That being said, we're going to have to wait until next year's survey before we can find out if there's any improving scores for the Ascent. We won't know till we get there, basically. And recalls aren't factored into our survey results. A lot of times people ask that question, and because a recall in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. The manufacturer is basically saying, we've got a problem with the car, we know about it, bring it in, we'll get it fixed. It won't cost you any money. And in most cases, the problem won't surface again. So that's part of the reasons why we're not putting recalls as a factor in our reliability surveys. And keep in mind that although your reliability for the Ascent isn't great, the Ascent's owner satisfaction is really pretty good. So that kind of dovetails on the second part of your question. The goodwill part is no, we don't take into account how consumer friendly or unfriendly a car company is. But at least with your experience, it seems like Subaru is doing what they can to take care of their customers. It certainly shows with a whole bunch of pretty high scores for owner satisfaction for Subarus. And who knows, maybe next year your car, your Subaru will be on the Ascent when it comes to reliability.
Very good.
Come
very
on.
good.
A little dad humor once in a while.
Thanks, Dad.
Anyway, thanks for your question about Subaru and reliability. Our last question is from Zach from Harvey's Lake, Pennsylvania. Zach writes, I recently adopted my dog Jake and was wondering how best to keep him safe in our travels. I drive a 2019 Volkswagen Golf All-Track, and he loves laying in the back seat. He's not a windsurfer and never hangs out on the window and never tries to get up front. I want to take him on hikes through New England next summer, but want to be prepared to keep him safe in the event of an accident. What are some of the things I should do? So, Emily, as one of CR's restraint experts, what advice do you have?
So first off, thanks for showing us a picture of Jake. Super cute. Way to win the hearts of the whole podcast team right there.
Oh, yes. We love dogs.
So a few things for you to consider when you're traveling with your dog. You mentioned that you want to take him on trips in the summertime for hikes and such. And so good safety tip to keep your dog safe, not just in the summer, but really all year round, is never leave your pet unattended in the vehicle. Even if you have the windows cracked or you're parked in the shade, the vehicle interior temperatures can rise really quickly and become dangerous for pets. So you want to make sure that, you take him outside with you, that he's not in an unsafe environment. And, it might seem like, okay, it's not that hot outside, so the inside of the car won't get that hot, but that's not true. So it's really just the safest rule is never leave them unattended. And then as far as a crash goes, the thing you need to be concerned about is your dog, is Jake, becoming a projectile. So, he's staying in the back seat, he's just lying there, but there's nothing actually restraining him and keeping him in place. So while we don't do testing of pet systems for restraining in the vehicle, the Center for Pet Safety does. And, the importance of restraining your pet is not just keeping them safe, but also keeping you safe, right? Because as a projectile, right, they can injure themselves, but they can also injure you or other passengers in the vehicle. So unfortunately, there aren't any federal regulations for pet products or pet safety products. There's no crash test standard for pet safety in the vehicle. But the Center for Pet Safety, they conduct their own independent crash testing of various pet crates, carriers, harnesses. They test with these specially made crash test dummy dogs. And they test actually to the federal regulation for car seats. So that's kind of the gauge that they're using, and they've published their results. We've covered their report on consumerreports.org, so you can find information about it there. And you can find the full report on their website. There's a link to it in the article, I believe. But, we also go over some other tips for, just to keep in mind if you're doing road travel with your pets, different things you might want to carry in the vehicle with you, things to be mindful of. So there's plenty of great tips for you. And there are plenty of ways for you to keep Jake safe.
Oh, excellent answer. Ryan, you and I are both dog lovers, and I'm sure that, more than once we've been called dummy dogs as well. So anyway, great question. Thanks for your answer, Emily. And that, believe it or not, is going to do it for this episode. As always, check the show notes for more information on the vehicles and the topics that we discussed. As a reminder, please keep your questions coming. TalkingCars@icloud.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.